Beautiful. Well, happy Thursday to everybody that's joining us today, either here live in the meetup with the community members, or if you're going to watch this later. We appreciate you. We know that time is, essential for making things happen, and a lot of us are business owners, so these are the peak hours. Today, we're just really excited to join as a community. Number one, because these meetups are just great moments to allow us to elevate and impact and empower each other through stories. We like sharing stories of small business owners that are changing the way that they're doing things. And I'm so excited today that we've got Alaa with us, AB Group. He's an architect, he's designing the future, and we're gonna get to hear from him in just a moment. Alaa, when we have these meetups, we like to have people kind of introduce themselves too, so that you know who's here to support you and is committed to you as a community member. So I'll introduce myself first, and we'll have the team introduce themselves, and then we'll have you introduce yourself. That's all right.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. My name is Adam Griggs. I'm your moderator today. I am the founder of a software as a service platform called CLARAfi, and I just am so appreciative of you and everybody else that's participating today, because Thursdays are part of my favorite part of the week. So thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for whoever is joining and listening in. Rachel McCool from GoDaddy. I manage community experiences. Jonathan and I team up on helping to drive our great LinkedIn group, and just really looking forward to hearing from you, Alaa, and especially about your design. Really, really cool. So thanks for being here with us.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I work with Rachel on developing communities here at GoDaddy. I'm also a member of the social media team focusing on engagement. I really do look forward to these every single week. I'm so grateful for you being here with us. Working in engagement, I get to talk to people on, via the GoDaddy handle about their businesses and how things are going. So to have the opportunity to do it in this capacity is just like, one tier higher. So I'm so grateful for that. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel and Jonathan, for your support, and the GoDaddy team for just keeping the community moving forward, right? We're here to impact and empower each other. And we wouldn't be here without the two of you.
That is all you, my friend. We are here, but that is all you. I'll take the credit and run with it, but I gotta say, for the record, that is you.
Love it. I love it. Emma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm Emma Lawrence. I'm the founder of Life is Coaching You, and I have this special desire to help millennials who are burned out to leave that burnout cycle behind and build their dream. And I have to say, Alaa, I was really excited for the architecture angle on this. Years ago in New York City, I dated an architect, and my life was never the same after that. I never looked at buildings the same or community the same. And so every time now I see architecture, I get really jazzed. Thank you so
awesome.
much for coming. Yeah.
I love it. And I'm pretty excited about this topic too. I studied architecture for 4 years and then did not become an architect. So there you go. There's the backstory. And for the members that are joining us today that have their cameras off, we totally are cool with that. We love that you're here and committing to join us and be part of the conversation. So definitely, if you have questions and comments, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And then Alaa, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of background about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start from the beginning. I was born in 1995. I'm 26 years old. And when I was born, it's a funny story. When I was born, my family applied for the immigration to the States to leave the country and come to the States. And Lebanon being a shaken country, it took 17 years for that process to get approved. So I'm 17 years old now, and I'm finishing my high school, and we get the news that we have our green card, and we're still back in Lebanon. And so I go to college in Lebanon for architecture school for about 2 months before we book our plane ticket and get everything in order to come to the States. And during those 2 months, I met a bunch of friends that are still friends up till this day. They finished their degrees in Lebanon. I was with them for 2 months, signed up for a couple of classes, and saw how the architecture community is so tightly knit together. And it's very different than any other major in the sense that you graduate with your classmates from one class to another, and you go from first year architecture school to second year, third year, and versus all the other majors where you sign up for random classes and you meet random people in those classes. So that was what hooked me. I had no clue what architecture was going to be like in the workplace. I didn't know what I can do with it as a career, but all I knew is that there's this group of friends that I'm going to be with for a long period of time. So that was really the hook. And when I came to the States, so back in Lebanon, also a little bit of background. In Lebanon, English and French are both second languages in the country. So you study Arabic, and you pick whether you want all your education to be in English or in French. So they don't really, physics, chemistry, biology, all that stuff, you don't study that in Arabic. You pick whether you want it in English or in French. So I picked the English route and finished high school, came here 2 months after finishing high school. And my English was already kind of okay in terms of like speaking to people, understanding people, but my accent was terrible. It probably still is up until today. But so I come to the States. I go to a community college here, and in the back of my mind is that sense of community that was created around that architecture idea. It always stuck with me. So I went to a community college, looked at the university with an accredited architecture degree, found what classes transferred from that community college, because of course I'm coming, there's very little capital. Trying to come and pay out of state directly for a university was something impossible. So I had to find a way to start the process, but also be able to work here and pay for a reasonable tuition. 3 semesters of a community college passed by, and then I make the shift into architecture school, which was the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And there I start the architecture program. And then in the second year of my studies at UNC Charlotte, the national board that certifies architects, gives them their license, they were working on a pilot program called IPAL, which is short for Integrated Path to Architectural Licensure. And so here's also a little bit of a background in terms of how to get licensed as an architect. You have to have an accredited degree. That's one component. A second component is getting your licensing exams, which are right now, I think, are 6 exams. And then a third portion of it is getting around 5,000 hours of experience under a licensed architect. So what that program did was it combined all of those 3 components under the umbrella of the university, and you could graduate with all of them complete and get licensed upon graduation, which probably shortened the path for those who can do it by about 10 years. So I joined that program, and I get connected with a company through that program, and I work with them up until graduation in 2020, May of 2020. And I graduate with a license at that point. I continue working with the company for a little bit longer, and then I leave and start my own practice. So that's really the journey in a summary.
There's a couple of things that I have to touch on. First of all, your accent's great. Just, you speak better than some of my relatives, so I wouldn't worry about that. On top of that, the other thing you mentioned was community college, university. The difference between an architect that started at a community college and those that went straight to the university, there's no difference. They're still an architect, right? As long as you graduated and did the due diligence, that shows that you had the capability and the willpower and the want to do it. The part that bewilders me is that not only did you go through that process and you had this passion because of the sense of continuity and community and the relationship that's in architecture itself, the part that bewilders me is that after all of that, in 2020, you jumped out and started your own business. Like, tell me about that. What are the thoughts going through your mind?
So it's also a funny story. It wasn't the shift wasn't because of anything planned or anything that was like prepared before. So in Lebanon in 2020, when COVID hit, a couple months after COVID started, there was a major explosion at the port, and that was something that the world knew about. So typically, normally there's small explosions here and there, but this was of a magnitude that the world knew about, and that devastated the country completely. So the economy crashed, and the currency value dropped tenfold. So my mom and my dad, they're both government employees. My mom is elementary school teacher for a government school, and my dad was a principal, an elementary school principal, before he retired. So they had worked all their lives, and they got to a point where they had enough to keep them going for the whatever's left, and that economy crashed and everything was gone. So then I was pressured to help and kind of find a way to supplement that loss. And I wasn't intending on leaving the company that I was with, but then I started taking some projects on the side in order to get that extra cash, so we can support as much as we can. And those projects, you do a good job on the first one, that person gives your name to somebody else, and within 4 or 5 months, I had about 8 or 9 projects under my belt, and I got to a point where I couldn't commit to a full-time job while doing that on the side. So that's when the transition happened. But it definitely was. I'm super appreciative to the sequencing of events. That's like if it was up to me and a decision that I had to make on my own, I would have probably waited a couple years to do it. But then again, if you ask any successful person in their later years of their career, and you ask them what's something you would do differently, they'd say I'd start earlier. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. And you've got some good karma that's following you. You know, just because you're taking care of your family, and that puts you in the right position, and everything happens for a reason. And what you're doing is not just taking care of your family, but you're in business for yourself now, right? Which is a risky thing to do. But one of the things we love here in our community is that you're in business for yourself, but never by yourself, right?
Right.
And you and I were committed to or connected during the GoDaddy Open just by happenstance. And we hit it off, and it was amazing. And you joined the community here, and I think I've seen a couple of posts just come through, and it sounds like your business is really doing well moving forward in this new world we live in. And I think architecture is just one of those piece points that it sounds like it's something that might be in the past, but really the way the world is moving and the way that we're transitioning our life, our business, our family, and we're having to pull it all together and live amongst it, right?
Yeah.
And live it comfortably. Back to that balance, that lifestyle, right? The business work lifestyle. I think that your industry is going to be even more of an opportunity. I mean, tell us a little bit about that. Tell us what you see for the future.
So a little bit about what you just said. Before COVID, people, or at least the architecture and design community, used to view live separate and work separate for the most part. There was some talk and some ideas about live work projects, and I'm sure there were some that were designed and were built, but it was the exception. When COVID happened, that changed people's mindset completely about this subject. So now people are comfortable in their homes, and they figured out a way to become productive in their homes. So I guess the biggest objection before COVID to working from home was that you can never really be as productive as you are in the office. And so, well, when COVID happened, again, like most change happens under pressure points. Like this COVID, whatever companies ended up evolving and coming out of it were the companies that pivoted and were able to find ways to become productive working from home, with their entire workforce working from home. And now the live and work are more integrated. So the offices we're designing in the with the idea in mind that this needs to feel very homey. And the homes I'm designing to have to integrate work in it. So that's changing how an office space used to be secluded, let's say in a home if you had one. Now that's a must in a home, if not 2 or 3. and how that integrates into the public space of the home. Because some people even have meetings in their home, in-person meetings, as the transition happens. So they're still, let's say, online, and they're meeting with people in their living rooms. So all that stuff is being thought through now more intently, and the homes are being designed to have work integrated into them, as so as the offices.
Yeah, I love it. There's an evolution in every business, but when you see things that change the entire dynamic of the world and how we all operate in it, it's kind of hard in certain industries to really change up the way you approach things. And for me, the home is a very intimate subject. Like, I'm home right now, right? And it's a very intimate subject because you have to be able to balance work and life and family and friends and commit to it. And then you have to be able to deal with that in a comfortable fashion. So you're not creating these barriers inside of your own home, right? So many people feel trapped, or they feel guilty if they see their work computer, they don't have that separated space. And we all need a little bit of that, those lines in the sand, those areas we won't cross to give ourselves space. And I love that that's what you're designing, because we're in the new normal. It's not going to go away. It's a functional possibility for people to have businesses, to have careers, to have an engaging, and thriving workforce that can work either in office or at home. And we should be able to give people both choices. So I love that that's part of the evolution of your business there at AB Group. Alaa?
One thing I would say, I definitely agree with you. I think the new normal, like as you say, is here. And if you look at it in the past too, all those pre-COVID, before we even knew that something like COVID could affect the world the way it did, most businesses that became big started in garages, and they started in homes. So people were still doing this, but unintentionally, right? Like, whenever you go file for your entities at the Secretary of State or wherever you have to file for your legal entity to create your business, you're still putting, the first day you do that, you're putting your home as your address, that 99% of the time. So now it's just that home office doesn't really have to be a temporary thing that you use as a, let's say, crutch to get your business moving. Now it could be a core thing. You could have a home office, a physical home office, and then an out there, let's say, co-working space where you rent rooms and you meet with people on an as needed basis. So it's really changed the dynamic quite a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on co-working space, because I see so many of these co-working spaces that try to create this ambiance of being in a home or a recreational area instead of being in the office. So it's interesting that we've blended all these lines, especially with what you said. Most large businesses started in a garage, moved to major corporations or big offices in commercial spaces, and now a lot of them are returning back to where they started, right?
Yeah.
It's cyclical. I love it. So, this is the new norm moving forward, and I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on it. The architecture, for new builds and custom homes versus inventory homes, right? The market is hot right now. There's not homes out there. So how are you finding success having a business that is traditionally very intimate? How are you finding success having that not only just in a traditional brick and mortar office, but also online?
Yeah, that's a question that I ask myself every day, and there's no right answer or to it, but I can tell you what I've worked and how what I'm doing is growing, I guess. So the company that I come from, we used to do a lot of, or I used to do, they still do it. I used to do a lot of public work, so schools, college campus buildings, and civic buildings, so fire stations, police stations, stuff like that. And that public sector has very strict requirements for companies in order to win that work. So coming out on my own, I realized pretty quickly that it's going to be very difficult for me to do projects where my experience has been. And being a 26-year-old, I looked at myself, I'm like, okay, I cannot rely as much on my experience and expertise when it comes to architecture, but what I can rely on is my ability to connect with a person on a personal level. And once you connect with someone at that level, they kind of tend to put your experience to the side, as long as they know that you are not going to make a mistake and disappear. You're there, you're responsible, you're reliable. They also, to a certain degree, they almost expect you to make a mistake, but then they expect you to fix it. And as you should. I mean, you fix it, and then that's how trust grows. So I played more of the personal side in terms of winning projects, and that fit right into the middle of the personal aspect of the home that you were describing earlier. And so it just naturally led to designing people's homes. And once you connect with them, you build some sort of a friendship, and that grows. They tend to trust you. And I've actually been surprised about how much autonomy those folks give me over the design. So that's another thing that you struggle with as an architect, is the owner is the person with the money and you're the person with the ideas. So how do you get to a point where the owner trusts you to come up with the ideas and they pay for it, right? Versus them having the money and paying for whatever ideas they want and building whatever, in which case the architect becomes more of a tool, like a production machine for the building rather than a designer. And so, and the answer to that, I found, comes down to that personal connection again. Once you build that trust between you and the owner, they stop micromanaging you. They tell you to go run with it, and whatever you think, do what you think, and then come back and take our approvals and show us what you're doing, instead of us like telling you where to put every wall and every nook in the home. So that, long story short, or the short answer to your question is that personal aspect has to be there as a foundation, and everything grows from that.
No, I love it. I think, obviously we're part of a community here, and it's a little bit tight knit, and there's trust that's built in your community, and not just here where we're at, but with you and your clients and your referrals. And referrals are like the lifeblood of business, right? If you have a community that can see your creativity and it starts to thrive, people want to brag on that. It's like the old saying goes, when you're driving down the street, there's, your dad was a carpenter. He's like, I built that. I worked on that. I fixed that. Your friends want to say, that was my home. This is my friend is architect. Check it out. We want to brag on the things that make us feel empowered. And if you're doing a good job, just not just like you said, being a machine, but having that personal touch and that relationship, I think that's the definition of success right there, when you're creating a practice like you have at such a young age and launching it in such a tumultuous time, and things are going to continue to evolve, right? We started with the standard home, then we went to traditional and flex homes and condos, and then we went to the multi-generational homes, right? That was a big deal like 10 years ago. And now we're going back into this, how do we create comfortable environments? And I think so many people can take your story, Alaa, and just utilize it as far as, like, if you have a brick and mortar business or something that's had a traditional way of doing business, they can see in your story that there is the ability to reach through the screen and connect with people and have that intimate relationship and build something that's not just practical, but meaningful, right? Because that's what we want to do, is create meaningful experiences. So I appreciate you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And to your point too, some of my clients, I have one client in Michigan that is building a home here on a lake in the North Carolina area. And I have another one in New York that's also building a home here. And so that connection and that personal relationship can develop over the internet. There is proof of it now. Before I did those things, I would have probably not have been convinced that it could, just because of the loss of physical touch, which is a big deal. But there's a way it can be done.
Yeah, I'm throwing off the reins right there, right? You got clients in different demographics that you never could have experienced before. I love that.
Absolutely.
I think there's power in that. So, Alaa, I love your story. I love what you're building. I love that we got connected in a community. And the reason you got in architecture is because of that community feel. And I love your commitment to making sure that people feel that they can have it, right? They can have it all. They can have that ability to work, exist, live, and do so in a comfortable, meaningful, and fun manner, right? One of the things we like to do when we have these invitations where we have guests come in is we like to open it up for comments and kudos. So Are you comfortable with us asking you some questions from the community members, Alaa?
Absolutely. Shoot, whatever you have.
Beautiful. Well, I'll start. What is the craziest idea that you have seen from people as far as being an architect?
In terms of like building shapes or ideas?
Whichever.
Oh man. The craziest thing is, I would say I have a client right now that she has a tax business, and it's an old neighborhood where the thoroughfare in the middle grew, and the street grew, and all of a sudden that boulevard, I guess, became a commercial street, and now there's these old houses with businesses in them in a commercially zoned district. And she's wanting to do something modern to her tax business so that she can be eye-catching from the street and basically mark her presence on the street. And so I go up to her and I'm like, okay, so I know you want modern, but there's all kinds of modern. There's this stuff that's very expensive, and there's this stuff that's kind of in the middle, and there's this stuff that's cheap. And her response to me was, you know those buildings in Dubai? I want one of those. So that was really the most eye-opening experience to me, and it was crazy. I was surprised. I was not expecting an answer like that. But if the owner has, I don't know, if they have that, it goes back to that trust and the personal foundation. Once they don't really need to have a lot of direction, but if they trust you and you create that connection with them, it's crazy how much great things you can do with them, because they just throw the ball in your court. You're like, hey, take it. You know those buildings that, as long as you meet my requirements, eye-catching, modern, and new open space, whatever you do with it, I'm happy. So it's this is one of the craziest stories, because again, coming back from a public sector work, the money is tight and you're always over budget, and there's never extra room to do crazy designs, especially with like county and federal projects. It's being on the private side is pretty nice whenever the owner has expendable money.
So we're going to see a picture of this building you created, right? You're going to drop it in an article?
I'm going to definitely make a post about it, hopefully win some awards from it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. I've got two questions for you. You live in a community that's, older. It's been around for a really long time. How do you blend your style of architecture into kind of the old style of Charlotte? And then I'm just wondering if the city has really tight regulations around kind of really modern architectural blend. And so that's one question. The other question is, what is your viewpoint on the taking of what's current storefronts and converting them eventually into like live workspace? Because I live in a city, I live in San Francisco, and I predict that we're going to see more and more of that in the future, where we're going to see less storefronts and more need. A city like this, there's not room to build a bunch of stuff. You either have to pull something down or you have to add on. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
So to answer your first question on how do you balance between the old and the new, or the modern and the existing, it's hard to say in general. It's always based in architecture on the site, and it's based on where the sun is during the day and how the new is interacting with the old. But I would say there's always that line where the existing and the new meet, is where most of the focus ends up happening. And that also the circulation, let's say, between whatever an existing building had and the front entry, all of those, and how the addition that you're doing to it works with that is also very important. Focusing, there's not really a straight answer to doing an addition on an existing. Again, it depends on the client's budget, depends on that level of trust, how much they trust you. But I think in terms of having the old existing stay intact. That's not necessarily always the right answer, and just creating the separation. Sometimes it makes sense to blend the two. Sometimes it makes sense to uh, uh, have a hard separation line. I don't know if you've looked at several adaptive reuse projects. Some of them end up leaving the shell as it is, let's say, and they completely gut the inside and create a completely different experience, so that when you're looking at the building from the outside, it's you see the traditional, and when you walk in, it's a completely different vibe to the space. It's a completely different zone. So those, and again, the right answer depends on the site, and it depends on the use of it as well too. So you won't find, for example, too many adaptive reuse projects transformed into hospitals, just because of how much HVAC, mechanical, electrical requirements exist in a hospital. So it'll probably mostly be on the entertainment side, restaurants, stuff like that, little co-working spaces, offices, stuff like that. And in terms of your second question, you're saying changing storefronts into more live workspaces, correct? Yeah. So I think it depends on the city as well. I think in Charlotte, something that's happening is there's a lot of, what do you call it, big apartment complexes being built. So a developer comes in, they buy 6 or 7 lots, they combine them, and then they build a first story of retail or restaurant, and then they put 5 stories of living on top of them. And so that is helping with the housing demand for sure. They are not typically affordable, because most of the developers make money when it's a little bit on the low end of luxury. So it's not high luxury apartments, but it's also not affordable housing. So that's where the sweet spot is for developers. So you'll see those happening in that sense. And so the retail ends up being separated by, I guess, the first story being the retail and separated from living. So it's not necessarily a small building that has a storefront where let's say your office is on the first floor and you live on the second or third floor. It's more of a big magnitude developments. And so that created something called the missing middle. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but it's a phenomenon here in Charlotte where I am, but I'm sure it is in a couple other cities, where you have single family homes, and there's a very small amount of duplexes, triplexes, and kind of mid-sized buildings where retail or live work can actually thrive. And then you have the sudden jump into big multifamily of like 400 units over retail. So that's why I think the missing middle is, people are conscious about that missing middle being absent, or the missing middle being missing, I guess, and they're trying to push for it. But it has to make financial sense for the developers that are doing it. So instead of big companies coming and developing multiple sites at a time, people that would drive that storefront transition. And the short answer to your question is yes, I agree with it, and I love the aesthetic of it. It's amazing, the live work and the convenience of it. But you need people that would be interested in developing stuff like that, or I would say small developers, maybe 2 or 3 people doing flips or something like that. Because those are the people that don't have the capital to go pursue the bigger projects, but also they're also tired of probably flipping single family homes or doing something. So that's their medium. And coming up with policies, coming up with incentives to have people thrive in that middle, in terms of developers thriving in that middle, is going to be the key thing to it, because those people will make money by doing that, and they'll grow into doing bigger stuff. But right now you'll see the small developer, let's say flipping homes or building and selling new homes, and the big developer doing the big projects. And there's very, very few, because of that live work, it adds a layer of complexity to the permitting of it, the design of it, which typically people they shy away from. So I know I answered a very long answer to your short question, but I think the spaces themselves, whenever they're built and they're or renovated, they work beautifully. But finding enough people interested in doing something like that is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, our city has very strict regulations around building and demolishing of old buildings. So there's an awful lot of, to your point, the shell, like sometimes just leaving the front of the house as is, and then kind of raising the back and redoing. But the other thing that we could probably talk a long time because I find this all really interesting, but I think the future of cities, as far as like here in San Francisco and our downtown, where in the past, it was all office buildings, right? And I feel like office buildings are going to convert more into work spaces, with the model that you're talking about, where there might be storefronts down below, so that people can get food and, restaurants and things like that. But it's going to be very interesting to see how it all evolves. And then the other challenge, certainly, that you're mentioning is about kind of the middle class of people not being able to afford these luxury apartments. So like here in our city, there's a lot of development of buildings that have a certain number of spaces in it for low income, and that's a requirement. And so it's interesting living in a town like this with very strict regulations and a lot of people who protest a lot of new development.
Yeah, one thing I would say about the requirement for affordable housing in any development, it's something that we have here in North Carolina and Charlotte specifically as well. But I don't think that's a good model to execute, just because of that hard separation between what's affordable and what's not. So again, back to that sense of community, where you live, let's say it's an apartment building or a neighborhood, there's that sense of community. And if there's a hard separation between what's affordable and it jumps from that directly to luxury, that sense of community, or there will be people living there will be factioned, and it won't be integrated as one development. So you do meet the zoning requirement by adding affordable homes, but it's not necessarily the best answer.
Yeah, I've got to jump in here on just one thought with what Rachel said, just based on a really crazy experience I had from my hometown in Tucson, Arizona. Tucson is a community that's separated. You either have university students or retirees. There's very few in between, right? And then there are people that support like the military base in Raytheon, but really that's the demographic: university students and retirees. And the universities were growing and growing and growing, and they needed to expand. And I love the creativity that happened here, but I'm also like bewildered by it. They needed to expand. And so in order to purchase up the land to build up some of these larger, dorms and teaching facilities, they made a deal with the city to pick up and move the original old Pueblo homes. So they moved like dozens and dozens of these old homes into a new neighborhood that was traditional and historic. And it's weird because the community gathered around it. They voted to approve it and pay for it. And like, you think the university students, they don't care. They're getting their university buildings, and the people that live there want what they want. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, they were able to kind of make this weird creative approach to checking off all the boxes. And then on the converse, you go up to like Scottsdale, and they just knock down buildings and put high rises up all day long. And they're mixed. And I think, to what you both said, you and Rachel, that the sharing economy has been here for a long time, and the perspectives changed on what we do and do not allow. And I think you'll see that start to integrate itself in the ways that we create our laws and ordinances and allow people to do things that are more creative and that are going to allow that blended environment of live, work, play.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is really important is to have a sense of history in your community. And one of the things that disturbs me, I grew up in the Midwest. One of the things that disturbs me is I go into towns where the middle part of the town used to be the center of the town, and it was vibrant and shopping and restaurants. Now you go in and it's like nothing there, but everything is like out sprawling, and it's all the same. You know, you go from town to town to town, there's no character. And that bothers me a lot. And then also just the economic depression based on that, because so many people used to be small business owners, and you know, again, it was all around the town square. So the cool thing is seeing cities that are revitalizing the town square concept and getting people to come back in, and you know, having that base of small businesses that support each other, and then getting people to come downtown, providing parking that's easy to access, that kind of thing. I think that's super interesting from city planning standpoint.
Absolutely. And COVID added to that by having people stay in their homes and not go into the city. So for the longest time here, downtown Charlotte was like a ghost town. And so it's very true what you're saying about the change and the loss of activity, I guess.
Well, it's on your shoulders now, Alaa. You have to create the new norm that all of us are going to be able to embrace and feel comfortable with, so that we can continue to build small business, right?
Challenge accepted.
I love it. I love it. Your story today has been great, and your share has been great. Did we have any other comments or kudos we wanted to offer before we close this one out?
Yeah.
I'll just quickly say, oh, sorry, Emma, go, please. Oh my God.
Oh, no, that's okay. What? He shut himself up. No, I have loved this today. I'm fascinated by it, and sometime, because I know we don't have time today, but I just love this idea of the nonprofit side of this, and the model of architects serving society that was featured on 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago, and you know what's possible in the actual design of a building to impact the quality of life of people. And so I know that's a whole other topic, but that's just exciting to me as well. There's so much within architecture to explore as far as the impact on human life.
Absolutely. It touches everybody's lives in many different ways.
Yeah. And that's pretty much, honestly, that's pretty much what I was going to say, especially living in New York City. You know, the architecture is, you know, I live up in Hamilton Heights, and, you know, we have all, you know, pre-war apartment buildings, and then you walk 20 blocks south and you have the Alexander Hamilton House is right there. And it's this beautiful building that was built in, you know, 1800s. And, you know, City College, which is all, you know, Gothic architecture. And it's amazing to think about. And you have to kind of look at it through that lens of these are all buildings, but they all have their own story, and they contribute to the culture of their neighborhoods and the city at large in such a nuanced and specific way. And to think about how architecture itself not only influences the community, but also thinking about, you know, climate change and city planning, and you know, green, you know, all the green buildings with the vertical gardens, and the buildings that are built for functionality, right? The ones that are built to house people, and not, you know, these billion-dollar towers in the middle of Midtown that nobody lives in. These people own the apartments, and they're there 2 months out of the year, and nobody lives there. And, you know, just thinking about who that serves and what that does for the area, it really is such an absolutely fascinating topic. And it's very encouraging to hear, you know, how there are people like you in this field who are thinking so critically about all of these different aspects, wherever you might be in the world. The fact that you're able to make these connections with people and facilitate this kind of change and these kinds of new establishments, you know, repurposing places, is absolutely fascinating. So I really, really took a lot away from today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think this was a great conversation. And Alaa, you're in an industry where we can literally watch the changes that are happening, physically happening in the world around us, with the retaining the history and the beauty that is our communities, and what's going to happen in the near future. So, you know, thank you for that. And Alaa, thank you so much for being our guest today and sharing your story, your perspective. Keep sharing with us what's going on in the world, because we want to know. We want to know how people are adapting and evolving. And obviously, you're building a beautiful practice in real life, IRL, and online. So I appreciate you for that. Alaa, one of the things we want to do before we let you go is we want to point our community members to you, to connect with you, right? Because that's what this is all about: connecting and leveraging and listening and learning together. So where can we send community members to connect with you that's going to be the most impactful for you and for them?
So we are on Instagram. That's where the most of the engagement happens, and Instagram/Facebook. The company website is abgnc.com, and on Instagram it's at architect.builder. Very straightforward. You cannot miss us.
That's awesome. I love the handle, and it's appropriate that you're leading with Instagram because that's what our meeting was on yesterday. So that's fantastic. Yeah, Alaa, thank you so much, and thank you to the community members that joined us today. We appreciate you, and if anything comes up in the meantime, you guys reach out. Let's embrace. Let's work together. And Happy Veterans Day to everybody that did serve, whether they are past serving or if their family members serve. Thank you for all the service out there as well.
Thank
Yeah,
you guys.
thank you so much. Have a good day.